Last month, child killer Deborah Jenner was let out on parole without any public notification until KELOLAND Investigates broke the story nearly 2 weeks later.
KELOLAND Investigates has also revealed flaws in the system designed to inform victims of what's happening with an offender, like coming up for parole or getting out of prison.
And tonight, we pick up our investigation into problems with the South Dakota Board of Pardons and Parole procedures and violations of victims' rights with yet another case.
In tonight's KELOLAND News Investigation, Angela Kennecke talks with a 1989 victim of a horrific crime and how victims of older crimes are left in the dark by the system that's supposed to protect them.
32 years ago this month, Dawn Auspis and her daughter, who was just 9 at the time, were the victims of a horrific crime.
I've worked for years to repair from this, years. And every October comes around, there's a couple weeks where I remember it.
Auspis and her daughter were alone when 2 young men entered their Sioux Falls home through a basement window to carry out a gang initiation.
And they broke into our room, my room. My daughter and I were sleeping in our bed. And they broke into my room, and 3 hours and 45 minutes of torture. They were torturing my daughter.
Even though Auspis and her family have worked hard to heal from the trauma, the pain is just right below the surface.
As a mom, there's nothing worse than not being able to protect your child. It's just, I was in another room being raped and beaten, but every time Liza would scream, he would beat me to quiet her down. And all I kept praying for was to get my daughter out alive. But she was being tortured. She was, they had a switchblade at her throat for this 3 hours and 45 minutes, laughing, licking her, and flipping this switchblade on and off on her.
Levi Flute was 19 at the time, and David Arapaho was just 17. After the hours of torture, they forced Auspis and her daughter into her car and made her drive to the ATM. Auspis says they planned to kill them and dump them into the gravel pit at Arrowhead Park, but her car ran out of gas.
So we parked, and he was hitting me. Liza was crying, and he kept hitting me when Liza would cry, and I was just trying to keep her calm. And I said a prayer, and I remember saying, God, please just tell me what to do to get my daughter safe. And the words came out of my mouth. I looked in the rearview mirror, and I saw this little wolf eyes of this guy. There was just this, almost like the movies show you that scary look. The scary look was there, and I said, what would your mother think of you right now? And the eyes went to this little brown-eyed boy, and he hit my shoulder. He hit the other guy and said, get out. And he said, you don't move, because I'll come back and kill you.
Auspis was eventually able to get herself and her daughter to safety. Flute, who was already awaiting sentencing for aggravated assault charges, got 120 years in prison for the crimes. Here's what he had to say to KELOLAND News in 1990.
I said I'm sorry.
He's an animal and he needs to be put away.
Arapaho was sentenced to 25 years and let out on parole after 9 years.
When Arapaho got out, didn't know he was out, they went to my husband's office, scared the office to death. They didn't know, and they walked in looking for me.
KELOLAND Investigates checked on Arapaho's status and discovered that he has absconded from parole.
So I checked with the Department of Corrections, and I said, what does this mean? Well, that means we don't know where he is.
That's great. I didn't know that. I thought he was back in jail.
What's the problem with you not knowing that?
It's awful. Now that I know he's really out, I'm scared to death.
Auspis was always worried about what Flute may do if he ever gets out, because she says he threatened her before he went to prison.
And he said, no matter what, I'll get you someday. You won't know when, you won't know where, and it might be 20 years from now, but I'll get you.
Flute came up for parole just last week. The specifics on Flute's hearing were never put out in an agenda by the Board of Pardons and Parole. While KELOLAND Investigates was able to determine the time of his hearing and obtain a link from the Board of Pardons and Parole, but when we tried to join via Zoom, we were removed from what was supposed to be a public meeting. Even though Auspis sent a letter to officials at the time of the crime stating she wanted to be notified of upcoming hearings and also attempted to inform the Department of Corrections when she moved, she has never received any notifications of Flute's parole hearings.
If you would have been notified that Flute was up for parole right around the time, this crime happened 32 years ago, would you have been at that hearing?
I'd have had everyone I know there, yes.
I checked with the AG's office and I said, why weren't you informed? And I was told it was because you hadn't signed up for Savin.
Didn't know about Savin. Never heard of it.
If you've got a case from 30 years ago, obviously the person is not going to be signed up for Savin. But anecdotally also, I mean, there are complaints that people who are signed up for Savin are not getting adequate information and not knowing about when hearings are taking place.
Sandy McEwen is the director of the University of South Dakota's Criminal Justice Program. She says there's a lot of confusion over how victims can exercise their rights under Marsy's Law, and that the automatic notification system known as Savin isn't a simple solution to guarantee all those rights.
There's really honestly no consequence for failing to abide by the Victims' Rights Statute.
Right.
If there's no consequence and there was not really a ton of support to begin with, it's hardly surprising.
The parole board told KELOLAND Investigates that we'd have to wait days to learn its decision on Flute getting out. When we got the information 2 days later, we told Aspas that Flute's parole was denied.
I'm completely relieved. I'm safe from that. However, you just gave me news that now I'm not sure that I am safe. So I need to make sure that I know as much as I can. I feel like we're still protecting them and not the victim.
What did Flute in Arapahoe take from you and your daughter?
Oh. They took my baby girl from me. She had to grow up fast, not trust.
Under South Dakota law, the Attorney General's office is supposed to notify any victim of the Savin system and how to access it. The AG's office tells KELOLAND Investigates the responsibility has been passed on to state's attorneys and victims' witness specialists. He also notes that the Savin system didn't go live until 26 years after Flute was sentenced. KELOLAND News has filed a complaint with the Open Meetings Commission over the lack of a specific agenda being released for all parole hearings.